Oliver, who plans an operation just like you see here, and it results in a deadly fatal collision situation. So the purpose of it is to learn, to advance our study and understanding, and serves as a real reminder that we don't have to learn the hard way.
Overconfident Oliver overlooks drone regulations. The tale of a drone pilot, accident and investigation for lessons in RPAS studies, inspired by true events in August 2025. Context and synopsis. This scenario highlights the importance of RPAS pilot diligence and training. Context matters. The story presents a sequence of events, their aftermath, and a tale of what could easily happen in real life if a drone pilot overlooks regulations. The book is based on true circumstances of an actual drone flight in the same general area, but excluding the infractions, violations, and safety risks described in the following. The goal is to immerse both new and experienced drone pilots in the mindset of an accident investigator and of a typical drone pilot who quickly finds himself way over his head. The plot builds into one of the most dreaded scenarios an RPAS pilot can imagine. This somber hypothetical story is shared so others can learn from mistakes that are all too common in drone practices. Part 1. Introduction and History. Overconfident Oliver was hired as a mapping technician for an established land survey company in British Columbia. He had joined the crew conducting various field projects around the lower mainland. The firm, based in Kelowna, wanted to incorporate LiDAR for topographical surveys and encouraged Oliver to acquire a drone certificate for in-house use. Oliver is a confident 23-year-old, technically savvy and familiar with the DJI pilot app. He has flown the Mavic Mini many times and completed several mapping missions using photogrammetry techniques. On a personal level, he is a typical young man who likes to party, mountain bike sports, downhill skiing, and consumes cannabis frequently, purchasing legal products from local BC suppliers. He is unmarried. Part 2. The Build-Up. His company experimented with DJI drones before, but data acquisition from smaller models such as the DJI Mavic Mini and Phantom proved unacceptable after processing. End users noticed distortions in AutoCAD deliverables. An engineer reported that while the photos looked good, the data was unusable. As a result, the company board approved investment in a DJI M350 equipped with an L2 LiDAR sensor and P1 camera payloads. A move promising solid results. The total investment was nearly $58,000 CAD including accessories. Out of the box, the new hardware boasted it could go to some 50 km downrange with new radio repeating technology. The company manager asked Oliver if he was able and certified to fly the new larger drone for an upcoming project. He replied confidently with a smile, "No problem, I am sure I can handle it." The survey and mapping operation was near Vancouver's cruise ship terminal and was scheduled for the following week. It was commissioned by an engineering firm. Oliver was excited to try it out. However, he understood Transport Canada regulations applied to drone operations, especially around cities and airports. Holding only a basic pilot certificate, he understood he needed an advanced license for the job, which was within a control zone. In a rush to get certified, Oliver searched online and found several training programs offering advanced courses. One he found cost only $199 CAD. He completed it through an online portal the next day and earned a certificate. He knew training was not mandatory but recommended by Transport Canada for the advanced certificate, but believed this was enough preparation. He spent a day reviewing Transport Canada's knowledge requirements, but quickly realized there was more to learn than expected. Determined, he challenged the Transport Canada Advanced Exam online and passed with 80% after a few attempts, relying on Google searches and AI-assisted answers. Next came the in-person flight review. He failed the first attempt, unable to identify the correct control zone for the mission area. On his second attempt, 24 hours later, he could not recall what Class F airspace meant and failed again. After multiple attempts with different reviewers over 3 days, he finally passed and was awarded his Advanced Drone Pilot Certificate, which allowed him to fly in controlled zones and near airports. His flight skills, however, were noted to be superior. As the survey day approached, he researched aerodrome data for Vancouver online and found a free resource showing aeronautical boundaries and control zones. Comparing it to Google satellite imagery, he noticed a large seaplane base west of the project area, but believed it would not interfere with his operation to the east. He accepted that his flight would occur within Class C or E control zone. He checked DJI FlySafe and noted a geofenced restricted zone about 600 meters, about 1,968.5 ft, west of his planned site. He filed a flight plan with Nav Canada's online portal. He got an email which denied the initial request, citing air traffic safety concerns. Alarmed the job could be cancelled, Oliver reapplied with a narrower operating radius, insisting the flight could be done safely. A Nav Canada senior manager responded with a direct approval by email about 8 hours after the reply, emphasizing that the drone pilot in command, Pick, bore full responsibility for avoiding conflicts with manned aircraft. The ATS manager also added there was no need for him to contact the tower at any time before takeoff or after landing. This contact would sometimes be required within some control zones in other areas apparently. Relieved, he finally felt ready for the job. Management would be pleased, and he had the opportunity to collect impressive LiDAR data. To add to his streak of confidence, the weather forecast looked perfect. Part 3. Arrival to the site. The day of the operation arrived. Oliver took a taxi from his hotel to the job site, carrying his RPAS equipment, which consisted of over 10 hard shell cases. The site manager greeted him and asked for documentation proving Nav Canada approval and his Advanced Pilot Certificate. Oliver prepared these documents ahead of time and handed them over. As he looked around, he began thinking about risks, including potential radio interference from surrounding high rises in the densely populated area. It was early morning with little air traffic. To the south, skyscrapers and office towers rose extremely high above the harbor. Cranes, the cruise ship terminal, and shipping containers dominated the northeast skyline, while a busy sea bus terminal was extremely near his planned flight zone. The site manager brought him a coffee and went over safety protocols. A helmet, safety vest, and boots were required to access the dock. When asked if he had a crew assisting him, Oliver replied that he was working alone and did not need help. They issued him a visitor pass after he signed in. A supervisor escorted him to a safe area away from dock traffic and instructed him to call by cell phone if any issues arose, and not to film the workers with the drone. Forklifts buzzed around, loading and unloading goods from a cruise ship as activity increased. Following survey best practices, he placed ground control points (GCP) around the site and set up an RTK base station to acquire satellite signals. Due to the tall structures, achieving GPS locks took far longer than expected. He waited, concerned that an RTK glitch could compromise the flight or corrupt data. He had seen RTK failures before that resulted in scrubbed flights. It frustrated him that challenges were emerging even before takeoff. Part 4. The operation. Oliver was to fly with the new L2 LiDAR sensor attached to the DJI M350. The total takeoff weight was just over 12 kilograms. The scan operation was expected to last about 15 minutes, providing good overlap for data quality. Because it was LiDAR, shadows from buildings and cranes were not a concern. Haphazardly, he did not read any formal checklists as he concluded it would take too much time, which he did not have. Moreover, the company did not have a checklist or an RPAS operations manual established for its drone program. The worksite was getting busier, and he wanted to get out of there as soon as he got the data. There also was a big hockey game later that evening, and he did not want to keep his friends waiting, he recalled. As he set up the drone and prepared for takeoff, he heard a seaplane engine accelerating. Climbing the nearby stairs looking west, he saw a twin otter taking off to the southwest, but away from his flight path. It was in plain view. He took this as a reassurance that air traffic would not interfere as it was going the opposite way. He powered the DJI M350 with the remote controller with a smile. The app confirmed there were no fly-safe altitude restrictions, and all other systems appeared normal on the app. After loading the LiDAR payload and completing basic checks and calibrations from memory, he started the motors. The RTK satellite connection showed green and stable, but a notice on the RC screen read compass error. His face fell. He assumed the surrounding steel structures were causing magnetic interference. The app warned, "Fly with caution," which he dismissed as normal. Oliver decided to proceed and lift off manually because of the tight space and nearby obstacles. He made a quick check around to make sure the area was clear of people. Obstacle avoidance was enabled. The controller beeped repeatedly as the drone climbed, sensing nearby objects. As the multirotor ascended with noise, nearby workers stopped and watched. They pointed at the drone, which was far bigger than any drone they had seen before. In his peripheral vision, Oliver noticed a man in a reflective vest waving. He assumed the man was simply curious about the drone. Approaching to hear him over the background noise, Oliver caught the words, "I've seen helicopters right in this area, just so you know." Smiling, Oliver nodded. He gave a thumb up but was irritated by the interruption at the same time. He presumed that any traffic would be laterally clear and certainly well above 800 feet at that location. Returning to the controller, he hesitated before starting the mission. He knew the drone would fly beyond visual line of sight, VLOS, behind the cruise ship docked nearby. The rising sun to the east was also making visibility more difficult. He accepted the risk with rising confidence. However, he did edit the flight and slowed the pre-programmed scan velocity from 30 to 15 mph to improve LiDAR density and flight control. He also checked the battery voltage, which had dropped to 69% by that stage in time. The stress of the job was increasing. Then he pressed GO on the RC controller after the controller asked him to check a box and verify the drone pilot was certified to do the flight in the restricted area and bears all responsibility for flight safety. Oliver checked the box, as he did so many times before, with an annoyed look on his face. The DJI Fly Safe app did not restrict the altitude at all even while the flight was well within a control zone. The M350 then climbed very swiftly to 150 feet AGL, paused, and accelerated rapidly toward its first waypoint autonomously. Switching to wide-angle FPV view, Oliver noticed a ship's mast much closer than planned. As he suspected, part of the route took the drone beyond line of sight, BVLOS, behind the cruise ship located alongside at the Canada Place dock, Figure 5. This BVLOS flight was more alarming than he expected. He considered aborting and initiating RTH, return to home, but overconfidence won. He knew he could not regain line of sight without leaving his restricted area, which required a site escort for safety. He decided to stay put and continue the mission. The data was important. Though he could no longer see the drone, the signal strength on the RCC-2 remained strong. He monitored its FPV feed and the map view, relieved to see everything functioning perfectly. The LiDAR point cloud also looked good. He examined the LiDAR data in real time using the tools in the app and assured himself that he would not have to come back another day to redo the scan mission. Part 5. The pre-accident phase. About halfway through the flight, he received a verbal warning from the controller, aircraft approaching nearby. He was not alarmed. Such warnings were common. On the map, he observed a seaplane around 5 kilometers away at 1,500 feet, about 457.2 m southbound. "Not a concern," he said aloud. He smiled as the sun began to shine. 4 minutes later, he set the controller down and sipped his coffee. He wondered if he would make it to the hockey game on time. Picking up his phone, he texted his boss. "All is well, almost done. Flying now. Better get back to it." Smiling face with smiling eyes. He also noticed an email message from his girlfriend in the inbox. What is her problem now? He wondered. In the meantime, the drone's flight route carried the mission farther north with each sweep, making visual tracking impossible. Oliver expected this. A brief loss of signal occurred from radio interference, but the link quickly recovered. He remained calm while checking on the RC controller flight progress and mission time remaining. Part 6. The Accident. At about 3/4 through the mission, Oliver suddenly heard a helicopter approaching from the west, behind nearby buildings. He quickly put his smartphone down and grabbed the RC controller. This was unexpected. The low, growing rumble immediately alarmed him. He moved to gain a better view, but the structures blocked his sight lines. Checking the GPS map display, he saw no aircraft indicated on the screen. The noise grew louder. His pulse quickened as a bit of panic set in. It was way too close to dismiss. Fear gripped him for the first time in the mission. Did he miss something? Why was it getting closer and louder? He looked from the sky back to the controller, trying to process what to do. The drone was still flying its programmed course, with a considerable distance downrange. Maybe it will pass by and keep going, he hoped and prayed. Should I stop the mission? Try a return to home, RTH, lower the altitude. What way is the drone pointing? He hesitated. There was barely time to think. He did not even know which direction the helicopter was coming from, how low it was, or where it was going. Shaking now and on full alert, he pressed pause mission on the RC Pilot app. The drone then stopped and hovered steadily in GPS hold mode. He checked the drone position on the GPS map and determined it was somewhere over water in the middle of the scan waypoint mission. The altitude was 350 ft/AGL. He gazed at the RC controller data and displays. He wondered which way was the best to get out of the way, but was not sure. Seconds later, the helicopter came into view between buildings, slowly descending behind the cruise ship, possibly turning toward the south. It was a Sikorsky passenger helicopter approaching for landing nearby. The deafening sound echoed through the harbor. "Oh shit, can you see it?" he shouted to bystanders up on a gangway. The people shrugged and shook their heads. One man shouted back in anger, "How the hell am I supposed to know?" No one could see it as they gazed, anticipating a serious problem. Oliver was stuck and at a loss for what to do next. Please let it miss, he thought to himself, and the chopper noise increased. Panicking, he panned the drone camera northwest using first-person view, FPV, and finally saw the helicopter in full view on the HD video screen. It was descending slowly with landing gear down and turning slowly into the area close to the drone. Oliver jammed the control stick downward to descend, but the drone responded sluggishly. The helicopter was descending low as well. At that time, the obstacle avoidance system activated, beeping and vibrating the RC controller and sticks. The drone slowed even more and then froze in midair. It was locked by its own collision avoidance sensors. The chopper flew closer and closer. "It's going to hit," Oliver screamed. He applied full left roll on the directional control stick, but nothing happened. The drone refused all input. Nearby spectators noticed his panic. "What is going on?" someone yelled, looking both ways. He did not respond. "Get it out of the way, kill it," yelled another bystander who could now see from his higher vantage point. However, this advice just distracted Oliver further as he tried to think of any remaining options left. He felt resigned and remained helpless. 2 seconds later, a horrific metallic impact noise reverberated through the harbor. The sound of tearing metal and rotor blades filled the air. People screamed and pointed as the helicopter spun violently. Oliver froze in shock, breaking into a cold sweat. His face turned pale as he felt faint and wet himself. Somehow, he felt connected to the drone and was traumatized by the collision even while he was not on it. Moments later, the stricken helicopter came into open view, spinning violently in rapid, uncontrolled turns. It pitched and rolled as fire and smoke trailed behind it. The tail rotor was gone. It hurtled through the air, struggling to remain airborne. Oliver gazed at the sight in fear and disbelief. This cannot be happening, he thought. The aircraft plunged into the cold water about 80 meters from Oliver's position and barely missed a cruise ship being refueled by a natural gas supply boat. There was a terrible crack. A nearby sea bus full of passengers also veered away as debris scattered across the harbor. While in the water, the helicopter began to sink and was keeling over hard with some smoke and fire rising from the wreckage. The water also turned slick with jet fuel, and the smell of fumes permeated the vicinity. For a few moments, the harbor fell eerily silent. No one appeared to be escaping the aircraft. Horrified onlookers watched helplessly from the ships and shoreline, many recording the scene on their phones. The helicopter, though largely intact, then inverted upside down but began settling more into the sea. Part 7. Rescue Efforts and Police Actions. A crewman from the heliport jumped off the dock with a rope and life ring, swimming toward the wreck about 100 meters from shore. The cold water, jet fuel and current forced him to turn back. The nearby sea bus slowed and attempted to help by throwing life rings toward the crash site. In a heroic effort, a deckhand dove into the water and tried to reach passengers trapped below in the wreckage. The cabin door and windows were likely sealed shut by the water pressure, making escape and rescue difficult. Moments later, 2 survivors surfaced and clung to floating debris. They had no life jackets on. Oliver thought of jumping in to help, but remembered he could not swim, and also did not have a personal flotation device. Minutes later, ambulances began to arrive. Crowds gathered along the dock, watching in shock as only a few survivors were seen struggling in the water. The sea bus attempted to rescue by lowering a Jacob's ladder over the side. A witness said the captain of the helicopter was seen surfacing, but went back below to save those still trapped. He ended up going down with the sinking chopper. A nearby bystander shook his head and remarked that those helicopters could carry more than 14 people, including the pilots. Several minutes passed and still there only were a few seen at the surface of the water. NAV Canada then closed the harbor's airspace and declared an emergency. Within 9 minutes, a Canadian Coast Guard rescue boat arrived with divers on board. A police helicopter hovered above while RCMP and paramedics rushed to the scene, tapping off the area and interviewing witnesses. Injured passengers were pulled from the water and rushed to hospital on stretchers. Major news outlets, camera crews, and reporters flooded the scene. Oliver was frozen and numb from shock. His hands trembled and his face was grieving. As he looked around, he noticed dock workers pointing at him while speaking to RCMP officers. An RCMP cruiser then pulled up with lights flashing. 2 uniformed officers ran toward him, commanding him to stay still and raise his hands. He cooperated with the police. One sergeant shouted, "Were you the one flying that large drone before the crash?" Oliver nodded weakly, "Yes." They asked for his identification and immediately seized his equipment, including the drone's RC controller with flight logs and his smartphone. One officer, familiar with advanced RPAS operations, surveyed the site and said, "There's no way you could have seen your drone behind that cruise ship when it hit, was there?" "No, I couldn't," Oliver confessed through tears. "I guess you didn't have a visual observer either, eh?" the officer said, shaking his head. "You just killed a lot of people." Oliver could not reply. Part 8. Arrest. Shortly after, Oliver was placed in handcuffs. He was given his rights under the charter and escorted to a waiting RCMP van. Media swarmed the area with cameras in hand. Reporters shouted questions while he kept his head down. One reporter called out, "Did you do this on purpose? Did you know there was a BC minister, MLA, aboard the flight at the time?" yelled a woman with a mic in hand. "No, I was just trying to do a survey along the shoreline for my boss," he somberly replied. As the van pulled away, voices from police radios confirmed reports of a mass casualty event involving a helicopter and a drone. It suddenly became clear that he was being charged with operating an aircraft in a negligent manner and endangering other aircraft and human life. Multiple counts of involuntary manslaughter were inevitable. He was held without bail pending further investigation. The Transportation Safety Board with RCMP forensic teams and the coroner began analyzing evidence, including the recovered DJI flight logs. All the bodies were shortly recovered in water only about 30 ft deep. Part 9. The Aftermath. At the police station, Oliver sat in silence awaiting his due process. His mind replayed the accident repeatedly. Why did I take this risk? Why did this happen to me? Why didn't I follow the rules? Why did I get into this complex drone business anyway? He thought. It was his first time being arrested. He had no criminal record. He was placed in protective custody as threats from the public mounted against him. Correctional officers strip-searched him, issued orange prison clothes, and led him to a small cell. A female officer shook her head and said quietly, "I would not want to be in your shoes now." He could not eat the dinner offered to inmates. Police investigators executed search warrants at his home and workplace, seizing his computer, drone equipment, and personal items. His company boss was summoned to testify before a panel concerning their failure to have proper RPAS practice and company operations manuals readily available. He was allowed to make a phone call to his home. His father answered and told him the story was all over the news, even on international channels. "It was a terrible accident, son," his father said. "Stay strong. We're praying for you." Oliver had suicidal thoughts for the first time in his life with survivor's guilt. The story trended across social media and major cable news networks. 5 people survived out of the 14 on board, thanks to the heroic efforts of the deckhand who intervened while risking his own life. 2 victims remained in critical condition, and the others experienced life-altering injuries. The helicopter captain was regarded as a hero for attempting to save others in his stead. One victim who was fatally injured included a high-profile BC minister, MLA, who frequently took the helicopter on business to and from the legislature in Victoria, BC. Among the fatalities were also 2 esteemed physician-surgeons who were slated to attend a conference in Vancouver that same day. Some insisted Oliver be prosecuted for murder. While in custody, Oliver provided urine and blood samples for toxicology testing when he visited the infirmary. He remembered attending a party 4 days before the flight where he had smoked several joints and eaten cannabis edibles. He knew the THC drug levels would be traceable. A nurse asked some basic health questions concerning his mental health during an intake interview. Oliver shared with her that he had experienced hearing strange sounds, voices, and had some disorientation and anxiety in the days following his intoxication with cannabis. His comments were documented for the investigation, and he was then referred for further assessment by a psychologist. There was concern he may have used this as an excuse, as his history and education pointed to good overall mental physical health. He took no prescription drugs. The following night, and due to prison overcrowding issues, he was moved to a shared cell. His cellmate was a rough-looking, heavier-set man facing manslaughter charges for impaired driving. When asked what he was in for, Oliver told the stranger the story. The man whistled softly. "That's insane," he said. "I've heard of many stories before, but never any quite like that." Looking out the cell window, he chuckled. Can you get a drone to deliver us some dope and cigarettes?" Oliver looked up and sighed. He prayed he would not have to bunk with that man for long. The stench of BO mixed with flatulence permeated the small and cramped cell. TSB investigation. Months later, the Transportation Safety Board completed its investigation. Divers recovered the wreckage of both the helicopter and the DJI M350 with its LiDAR payload. They combed through all the wreckage and pieced it back together in a large hangar in YVR. PBS Frontline was allowed to film and interview the ongoing investigation. Reporters were going to do a nationwide documentary in the USA highlighting drone safety, along with incidents and accidents. This would be their cover story. The TSB concluded that mechanism of accident was caused by the drone striking the helicopter's main rotor blade. The impact resulted in the drone's main body being flung into the tail section of the helicopter. The kinetic energy of the drone penetrated the aluminum alloy structure, resulting in catastrophic damage to the tail rotor's gear transfer box as well as the tail rotor blades. This then led to a chain reaction and a catastrophic failure of the tail rotor which separated from the chopper. Investigators also found that one of the two lithium polymer batteries from the drone penetrated through the chopper's airframe near the fuel cells, where it then exploded. This also triggered a massive fuel leak along with a secondary explosion and fire. Investigators also determined that the helicopter pilots could not have avoided the collision. The surviving co-pilot and PF, pilot flying, testified that she saw the drone only a split second before impact. It blended into the background and was stationary, but the time I pulled up on cyclic controller it was too late, she recalled. The TSB also noted that the helicopter crew was not informed of drone activity in the area, even though Oliver's flight plan had been filed and approved. Air traffic services were not obligated to warn local aircraft of drone operations before the time of collision due to heavy workloads, a point the board later cited as procedural weakness. Investigators reconstructed the full sequence of events using DJI flight logs and using 3D computer programs complete with simulated animations. The data in the video showed exact drone pilot control stick inputs, flight settings, altitude, position, and velocity from takeoff to the moment of impact. It revealed that Oliver flew beyond his approved boundaries and occasionally above his authorized altitude. In the TSB animated video replay, it also revealed how Oliver could not have seen the incoming traffic from his vantage point. The report concluded that the collision occurred because the drone pilot failed to maintain adequate visual contact and situational awareness. Oliver knowingly flew beyond visual line of sight in a congested air traffic control zone, violating the Canadian aviation regulations governing RPAS safety. The board also noted that Oliver had not reviewed the nearby heliport's approach and departure paths, information readily available in the Canadian Flight Supplement, CFS. If he had consulted the CFS, he would have known about the active heliport along with its approach and departure headings within the area. These magnetic radial bearings were in the vicinity the drone was scanning. This knowledge was also a basic requirement of an advanced drone pilot. Part 10. TSB list of Oliver's failures, root causes listed, and other findings. A surveyor business opting for an in-house drone program to save costs. His company's drone program came without proper safety planning or risk assessment. There was no operations manual, no formal crew training program, and no safety risk management manual or procedures in place. Drones were treated as an occasional sideline rather than a regulated part of operations. The pilot himself was inadequately trained. Although certified, Oliver lacked real experience and training in complex environments. The company's focus on saving money led to poor safety oversight. They expected too much production from too little resources. He also had only 5 flights on the M300 series drones. His total experience flying drones was estimated at only about 35 hours, most of which was on the DJI Mavic Mini drone, under 250 grams. He also did not have a pilot logbook. A failure to properly plan an RPA flight. Oliver appeared unaware of the nearby heliport, or he did not consider it as a potential threat to his planned flight scan that morning. A proper site survey would have revealed its location. Investigators could not confirm whether he knew about the heliport or not, as he was caught lying under oath at times. Failure to have ATS contact number. Overconfident, he lacked a phone number to quickly reach ATS personnel, who, in an emergency, may have been able to alert the approaching helicopter in time for the crew to take evasive action. Failure to get adequate training. The $199 online course he took provided no practical understanding of Canadian aviation regulations or airspace interpretation. The program was later found to be inadequate and substandard after a TC audit. The developers of the training program, located in China, were found to have no experience or qualifications in Canadian aviation or drones. No crew to assist the drone pilot. A helper visual observer, VO, could have assisted in ground air safety management, monitored VLOS, and assisted with RTK base station setup. Oliver was overly reliant on DJI failsafe programs and too overconfident. The FlySafe geofencing system did not restrict flights or altitude in that area. This gave him a false sense of security. Oliver assumed that because there were no warnings, it was safe to fly at that specific location. He may have also assumed no aircraft would be flying so close to the tall city buildings to the south. Flying BVLOS knowingly. The company's choice to cut corners and save company wages by not hiring an experienced drone contractor and/or extra-hand visual observer in such a risk-prone area was a considerable root contribution to the accident. Oliver was pressed and chose to illegally fly BVLOS. Panicking at the collision avoidance situation. When the collision became imminent, the drone pilot panicked and failed to act effectively according to the flight logs. The TSB determined that had he used the map display, switched into manual mode, then reoriented the drone manually in time, he could have flown towards safety before the collision took place. It was not clear if the drone was able to be switched to in manual flight mode. He did not understand the limitations of obstacle avoidance. In GPS mode, the system restricted drone pilot control when it detected an object, which is why the drone stopped responding normally and froze at the worst possible time. Had he switched modes, it would have disabled this DAA feature. He was not monitoring aviation radio frequencies. Although not legally required, using a VHF receiver could have alerted the drone pilot to the inbound helicopter and helped meet his obligation to always avoid all manned aircraft. In addition, a brief distress call on the MF might have been enough to communicate an emergency to the helicopter pilot, who could have stopped and hovered, an ATS in the critical seconds preceding the collision. He ignored local advice. The dock worker witness the TSB interviewed exclaimed that he had warned Oliver about helicopter traffic earlier that morning. Oliver discovered after the fact that chopper departures and arrivals occurred every other hour during peak times. Oliver disregarded advice from a man who knew the area best. He failed to consult the Canadian Flight Supplement. The free online resource he used lacked detailed navigation data and omitted nearby heliports' very presence. It was not a Nav Canada certified publication. Investigators confirmed the resource Oliver used was way outdated and stated in small print that it was not to be used for navigation. He was overtasked. To save costs, Oliver was tasked to manage every aspect of the project alone. This included complex land survey workflows, GCP targets placement, lead DAR settings, RTK connectivity, ground safety, and visual line of sight. Task saturation left him vulnerable to error. The use and abuse of cannabis. Toxicology tests found high levels of THC in his system. Though there was no evidence of same-day use, police had found cannabis products in his backpack. The TSB concluded that this impaired Oliver's focus and contributed to his poor decision-making and lack of focus. Transport Canada regulations prohibit any drug use with impairment capability within 28 days of flight operations. Part 11. Defense, Judgment, and Sentencing. Months later, the trial began. Oliver's defense team faced a difficult case, and one with few precedents in Canadian aviation law. They argued that he had acted with good intentions, having filed a legal flight report with NAV Canada and received formal approval for the general area where the accident occurred. They also emphasized that he held a valid advanced pilot certificate with a diploma in GIS studies. At the trial, Oliver claimed that his employer had pressured him to complete the survey on time. He feared losing his job if he had refused the task, or if he backed out at the last minute. He described the day of the operation as stressful and overwhelming. The defense also argued that the helicopter crew should share partial responsibility for not detecting the large drone, which had strobe lights. Prosecutors countered with DJI flight log evidence showing that the strobe lights were turned off at the time of the collision. The defense also suggested that NAV Canada's air traffic services should have warned the helicopter of the drone's presence. The prosecutor and judge rejected this, citing Transport Canada regulations that place full responsibility for collision avoidance on the RPAS pilot. Prosecutors presented an email from NAV Canada explicitly stating that the drone pilot bears sole responsibility for avoiding all manned aircraft. During the proceedings, a NAV Canada controller who was on duty at the time testified about chronic understaffing and heavy workloads. He confirmed that controllers were not required or equipped to monitor drones in real time. "We had no way to see that drone, and we didn't know its exact flight position or launch time," he said. Recordings from ATS Communications tapes confirmed his testimony. Called on the stand and under oath, Oliver pleaded guilty to all charges and issued a public apology to the victims' families, both written and spoken. His defense hoped his remorse and cooperation would lessen the sentence. The Crown sought life imprisonment for operating an aircraft in a dangerous manner causing mass death, under the Criminal Code of Canada. One prosecutor representing the family suggested a charge for murder rather than manslaughter. In the end, the court accepted the Crown's recommendation of life imprisonment, with eligibility for conditional release after 10 years instead of 25. Oliver also agreed to perform community service by speaking publicly to drone operators and students about his experience. The judge stated that the sentence reflected Oliver's blatant disregard for safety and the rule of law, resulting in the mass loss of human life. The judge and jury acknowledged potential flaws in the broader system, particularly in communication between drone operators and air traffic control. A government panel was later established to review procedures for drone flight coordination in controlled airspace. Part 12. Time in Jail and Transport Canada revisions. Because of his remorse and good behavior, Oliver was transferred to a minimum security facility at William Head near Victoria, British Columbia later that same year. There, he lived in a communal setting and participated in grief counseling for survivors, guilt, and suicidal thoughts. Many of his neighboring inmates were serving life sentences for murder of various degrees. He joined a 12-step recovery program and overcame his dependence on cannabis. During his time in custody, he turned to religion, spoke in Bible chapel services, and worked on educational materials raising drone safety awareness. Following the tragedy, public trial, and inquiry, the federal government and Transport Canada ministers imposed an interim ban on all drone operations in Vancouver and Victoria harbors. Officials announced a new zero-tolerance policy for unauthorized drone flights, warning of severe fines and jail time for offenders. Word spread fast and reports of incidents or illegal drone activity dissipated sharply. Local governments also installed radar-based drone detection systems to monitor unauthorized flights and identify drone pilots and their RC locations. This led to more arrests and charges of uncompliant drone operators, some of whom were fined $100,000. In addition, multiple class action lawsuits were launched by the victims and families for damages. The monetary suits quickly exceeded the $2 million maximum liability insurance policy the drone pilot's company had in place. Moreover, insurance adjusters were reluctant to provide any liability coverage given the negligence of the company and drone pilot. The policy's terms and conditions stated clearly that any drone pilot must operate within their Transport Canada legal limitations and certification. Public hostility toward drone operators increased sharply. Stories about the victims' families circulated widely, creating lasting stigma against drone use near populated areas. Transport Canada introduced stricter training and certification standards for commercial drone pilots, including ground school mandates for all RPAS operators and written exams to be done in person, not online, and not open book. Recreational drone operators were restricted to flying only within recognized model aircraft zones, supervised by the Model Aircraft Association of Canada, MAAC. Part 13. Conclusions and final notes from author. In Canada, drones have collided with helicopters and other aircraft, prompting emergency responses and Transportation Safety Board investigations. This story draws inspiration from those real events, though many similar near misses likely go unreported. See references below. Thankfully, this account is hypothetical. It was written to illustrate how quickly complacency can turn dangerous. None of the accidents described occurred. The author conducted an authorized drone flight in the same general area in 2025 and observed firsthand how easily such a tragedy could happen if regulations were ignored. Environmental and situational context described in the story with the ship, refueling barge, the busy heliport, drone approvals, as well as VLOS challenges were all true. Complacency remains one of the greatest threats in aviation. This story serves as a wake-up call to remind every operator that each careless decision, however small, creates real risk. The imagined outcome here could have been far worse. The helicopter might have collided with a cruise ship, the sea bus, or the refueling barge, igniting an explosion. It could have collided with nearby buildings and walkways, endangering hundreds more. This scenario also underscores once again that disasters rarely result from a single mistake, but from a chain of preventable failures. Every commercial and advanced RPAS pilot should take this as a call for preparation, discipline, and humility. The intent of this story is not scare tactic, but to ensure that such a situation never occurs. It challenges every operator, author included, to strengthen his or her detect and avoid DAA practices, uphold safety standards, and resist the temptation to take shortcuts. The end. About the author. David Carlos is an advanced and CL-1 drone operator, instructor, and flight reviewer. He has logged over 4,000 hours of complex drone flights over the past 14 years. He currently flies the DJI M300 series multi-rotor for mapping operations, inspections, and survey data. Carlos has trained more than 3,500 pilots across Canada since 2015 for advanced RPAS and SFOC certification. He has recently acquired his complex Level 1 certification with Flight Reviewer rating. Victoria Air Photos and Survey Training Division is a Transport Canada compliant training center offering ground school classes for advanced and complex pilots from all walks of life. Carlos is an advocate for safe and responsible integration of drones into Canadian airspace. Carlos is also a manned fixed-wing aircraft pilot, commercial small vessel captain, and has studied criminal justice at Camason College, along with counseling support. He resides with his wife and family in Sonishton, BC.